The National Guard in Los Angeles, President Trump's decision and what it might mean for future immigration confrontations. And this just in. About 700 Marines have been ordered to support the mission in L.A. And about all this, California sues the president, while he suggests California's governor should be arrested. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. Let's start here. Los Angeles is a city of 3.8 million residents. Los Angeles County has a population of nearly 10 million. President Trump has suggested that city and that county are, or were, on the verge of lawless collapse. We are obligated to say, not true. Here is a map of the city showing the comparatively small area in which protests against federal immigration actions occurred. Over the weekend, most of those protests were peaceful. Wildcat violence requiring swift police response did occur. If you peered only through the straw that is social media, you might conclude the city was ablaze, and you would be wrong. Protesters closed a freeway yesterday afternoon. Yes, vandals burned vehicles and defaced buildings and ICE vehicles. These are crimes. The Los Angeles Police and Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office have arrested more than 40 people for these acts of violence, but they do not, at this stage, believe they need help from National Guard troops. Some 300 have arrived anyway, ordered into the city by President Trump, against the wishes of the Los Angeles mayor and the California governor. Today, California sued the Trump administration over that deployment. Add to that, 700 Marines are now on high alert to go to Los Angeles. Also today, the president said it might be a good idea to arrest Governor Gavin Newsom. Monday in L.A. was calmer than Sunday, but even Sunday, much of Los Angeles was as usual. The 55th annual Pride Parade drew tens of thousands without incident. Beach time and brunch time continued, as did yard work and church attendance. Los Angeles was tense, but not under siege. So how then did the City of Angels find itself thrust into this edgy standoff, one with potential ramifications for other American cities? It began Thursday when undocumented immigrants attending check-ins at the Los Angeles Federal Courthouse were detained for hours in the basement. In video provided to CBS News, you can hear them saying, "Ayuda," or help. On Friday, protests began outside the Metropolitan Detention Center in downtown Los Angeles, in Compton, and in the nearby neighborhood of Paramount. That's where federal agents had searched garment factories for workers suspected of being undocumented. As night fell, clashes flared, continuing into Saturday. At the detention center, protesters held a rally. Law enforcement emerged and fired rubber bullets, flashbangs, and tear gas. Among those hit with a rubber bullet, a U.S. correspondent for Australia's 9 News who was reporting live at the time. See that right there. It was at this point President Trump deployed 2,000 National Guard troops. The first arrived Sunday to protect a federal facility. Local and state Democrats accused the president of inflaming the situation. He offered this by way of reply today.
The people that are causing the problem are professional agitators, they're insurrectionists, they're bad people, they should be in jail.
I want to start tonight with Nydia Cavazos, who joins us from downtown Los Angeles. Nydia, what did you learn today? What have you seen today? And what reporting have you pulled together?
Major protests across downtown L.A. continue for now. In fact, this crowd behind us just arrived, and they say they're here to protest the immigration enforcement activity that has been seen for the past weeks in L.A. They're protesting against the deployment of the National Guard, but they're also here because we're next to the federal facilities that we've known to be detaining migrants after they've been arrested, either after their ICE check-ins or after these ICE raids. And this is according to immigration lawyers. And we were here this morning along with U.S. Representative Jimmy Gomez as he tried to get access to those federal facilities and the underground installations of this federal plaza to conduct what he says are his oversight rights as a member of Congress. He was denied access after being denied access during the weekend. Let's take a listen to what he had to say and why this is concerning to him. How concerning is it to you that you can't have oversight of these facilities?
No, it makes me angry because I'm not only a member of Congress, but I'm the member who represents this area. I actually have this in my congressional district. And a lot of the folks that they are violating their due process rights are folks that are from my district. So I want to make sure that, one, the conditions inside when it comes to cleanliness, when it comes to getting their food, when it comes to getting their medicine, that they follow all the rules and regulations.
Now, Representative Gomez says he's angry, but what we also know is that the people who are showing up to these protests, they're also angry at how immigration enforcement activity has taken over what they say is their city. It's affecting their community members, and so they've been showing out in mass numbers, again, surrounding this federal complex and in other areas in L.A.
Nydia, what is the atmosphere as you're speaking to us right now? Would you describe it as orderly and peaceful or something else?
There's some sense of order here. This is what we've seen throughout the past days. It typically starts off as a peaceful protest, but as time passes by, it tends to escalate. And this is when you have the images of federal agents, federal officials clashing with those protesters. But this is a scene that we typically see at the beginning of a protest. It starts off slow, peaceful, but it has the potential to escalate.
Indeed it does. Nydia Cavazos in Los Angeles for us. Thank you very much. Ed O'Keefe joins us now from the North Lawn of the White House. Ed, as you know, and as our audience might know, the last time a president defied a governor of our country and sent in the National Guard against that governor's wishes, 1965, the state Alabama, the issue underlying it, enforcement of civil rights protections. We're in a different place now.
We are. He's using, in this case, part of what's called Title 10 that allows him to deploy the National Guard, quote, to repel invasion, suppress rebellion, or execute federal laws. But what's different is that he also signed a memo on Saturday night, Major, that goes further, saying that the Guard could be deployed not just in California, but anywhere in the country, quote, where protests against these functions are occurring or are likely to occur. And then speaking with legal experts today and those that track the use of presidential powers, they say that kind of open-ended memo that anticipates potential violence, plus response to what they perceive as violence, or those trying to block federal agents from doing their work, has never been written by a president before. And so we are now entering yet again with this president, be it in his first term or now his second term, sort of uncharted presidential power authority that is going to lead to legal debate, which began today, of course, with the California governor and attorney general filing suit against the White House for what they consider to be an illegal order because they did not consult the governor before announcing that deployment.
And Ed, just to underscore what you just reported and based on your conversations with legal experts, so if there is an assumption within the top ranks of the Trump administration that something might happen in another jurisdiction, based on that assumption, they now believe they possess the power to deploy federal agents to suppress whatever they assume might happen.
That's what this memo says. And that is what's likely now going to be the basis of legal challenges for the governor of California and potentially anywhere else. But the read that people who track this stuff give to that memo is that it's essentially an open-ended, if we think something might happen, we can send troops kind of order that no president's ever issued before. And so that's why, for example, we saw this initial deployment of about 300 National Guard. You might have thought to yourself, what happened to the 2,000? It's because that memo is not about Southern California specifically. It's anywhere in the country, anywhere they perceive the potential for something similar to what's unfolding in Southern California to occur. So as I put it hypothetically to one legal expert, let's say they're continuing to carry out raids in New England and they start blocking the federal building in Boston. This memo would allow them to send Guard to Massachusetts. If there was a similar incident in Orlando, potentially hundreds of Guard could be sent there as well. Chicago, any other area of the country where this kind of protest occurs. It's part of why you saw Governor Newsom and other Democrats through the weekend say this is extreme. It's trying to stoke this anger. But if you're going to go out and protest, do it peacefully, because any signs of the kind of vandalism or violence or destruction of property we've seen in Los Angeles could compel the president to go, okay, Defense Secretary Hegseth, send it to that part of the country as well.
And Ed, it appears for the moment this White House relishes this confrontation.
Yes. The president twice today, once again openly criticizing Governor Newsom, who he's had an on-again, off-again love-hate relationship with through the years. They go back a ways, both professionally and personally. But they also look at, for example, the CBS News polling that came out yesterday. I know you're going to be talking about it with Anthony Salvanto in a little bit, that suggests a majority public support generally for the president's immigration and deportation programs. They got issues with some of the specifics, like sending a person who's been here to another country without due process. In fact, there's support for making sure that due process is used, as it looks like in the case of Abrego Garcia now will be. But broadly, they know this is his best issue. He remains widely supported by the American public for it, and that's part of the reason why they're focused on it.
Ed O'Keefe with the perspective and very vital legal analysis. I appreciate that very much. Scott McFarland joins me now here at the family table. Scott, we should remind ourselves that January 6, 2021, there was a violent episode at the U.S. Capitol. It was a full-blown riot. Many people were arrested, and there were prosecutions. Put that and what we saw in Los Angeles in some kind of rough context, if you'd be so kind.
Yeah, Los Angeles in this unrest is already marinating in politics, but it's going to get inflamed by what some of the victims of January 6 argue is a hypocrisy with how the president and his top security officials are characterizing Los Angeles versus how they're characterizing the U.S. Capitol siege. First off, there's concerns that the president has used the phrase insurrection to describe what's going on in Los Angeles, where he denies there was an insurrection when they tried to seize the Capitol and overturn the results of an election. But there's also just these other little parallels along the way. Concerns about the Mexican flag being flown in Los Angeles when the Confederate flag flew here. Concerns about the wanted posters that are now up for people who are sought for assaulting police in Los Angeles. Certainly nobody opposes that, but they've pulled down the wanted posters for the dozens still wanted, still not found for January 6th. Those contrasts are fueling concerns of hypocrisy, according to police officers who responded that day who spoke with CBS News.
And also remind our audience of the pardons issued on day one of Trump administration's second time around. 1,500
plus pardons included 600 or so, by our count, of people who were charged with assaulting police. About a quarter of them pleaded guilty and admitted to assaulting police. These forthcoming charges are going to stand in diametrical opposite contrast to what was absolved by the president on January 20th.
And Scott, as a student of what happened on January 6th and the many political reactions to it, some of them very defensive, many of the Republicans who over time became defensive about January 6th said, well, you know, in the summer of 2020, there was unrest all over America and people weren't arrested or prosecuted for that. So why are you going hog wild and prosecuting and arresting people on January 6th? It seems to me that is also part of the backdrop for what's playing out in Los Angeles.
It will also mechanize these efforts to minimize January 6th if you have something else to point to, and there is something new to point to.
Scott McFarland, appreciate it very much. Tonight on The Takeout, more from Los Angeles Democratic Congresswoman Norma Torres and later California Attorney General Rob Bonta. Also, DNC disunity. Democratic National Committee Chair Ken Martin expresses frustration over continued infighting at the top. And when it comes to job approval, what are President Trump's strengths and weaknesses? Our Anthony Salvanto reveals answers found in a new CBS News poll. That and much more on The Takeout. Welcome back. California Democrats highly critical of stepped-up immigration raids in Los Angeles, and this includes Congresswoman Norma Torres, who was denied entry to a federal facility holding ICE detainees.
I stepped out of LA so that order can be restored.
Congresswoman Torres joins us now. She represents California's 35th congressional district, east of Los Angeles. Congresswoman, thank you for joining us. Your district is not the epicenter of this, but your constituents are affected. Tell me how and characterize the tactics you believe Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement are using.
Absolutely. Thank you, Major Garrett, for the opportunity to talk to your listeners. You know, it is extremely disappointing that the federal government cannot follow and abide by their own laws. Number one, ICE agents should not be coming into a community armed to the teeth, covering their faces in undisclosed vehicles, unmarked vehicles with no license plates, and profiling people simply because of the color of their skin. They don't have warrants in many of those cases. They do not allow for due process. And what we are saying is that these tactics have really are the cause of what we are now seeing in the community. Los Angeles is a very complex city with a lot of different groups. It's almost as a world within a city. Many different groups, many different agendas. The people that understand the city better are the Los Angeles Police Department and the leaders in Los Angeles. And we ought to be giving them the opportunity to calm the situation. The situation cannot be calmed until ICE stops conducting their raids, the violent raids that they have continued to conduct.
Congresswoman, you have heard Tom Homan, the president's border czar, say over and over again, these enforcement actions, those are his words, are meant to take off the street national security threats or public safety threats. And that's the core of their mission. Do you disagree that that is the core of the ICE mission?
I absolutely disagree that is the core, I think that they are lying and utilizing this talking point as a way to target the Latino community that has created an opportunity for the entire state of California to grow its economy to the level of rising up to being the fourth largest global economy in the world. We do not need the assistance of these irrational chaos staff or the chaos that Trump has created in our communities. They are responsible for what is happening in our city, and they will be held responsible for the many injuries that our local law enforcement officers have suffered and the damages into our communities.
On Thursday, undocumented immigrants went to a federal courthouse for a check-in. And as we understand it, they were held for some number of hours in a basement there. And as I understand it, Congresswoman, you and other members of Congress sought access to that facility. Explain to my audience what happened next.
Absolutely. We left Washington, D.C., and most of us arrived like after midnight to LAX. And by 8 o'clock in the morning, we presented ourselves at the federal building downtown Los Angeles. We were there, 4 members of Congress, our staff, 2 nonprofit organizations that were documented the incident that occurred the night before, with attorneys that were providing us with a briefing before we went in, or we were trying to go inside the building. We began communicating with our liaison inside the building, who told us to stand by, that she was trying to get authority to allow us into the facility. At some point, they said for us to move to the side of the building and to go to a little side door where attorneys present themselves to talk to detainees. We were there speaking to the authorities through a video camera. We presented our congressional IDs, and we said we are 4 members of Congress, and we want to be invited in, and we need to have a briefing on what has happened, and we need oversight. We cited the law that provides us the right to go into these facilities unannounced. And for about 4 hours, they kept us there waiting and waiting and waiting until they began to deploy a chemical agent into the air, We know that they deployed it. We have verified witnesses that verify that they deployed it twice. But we believe that this chemical agent was deployed 3 times while we were there in an effort to get members of Congress, to stop members of Congress from doing our job, and that's to provide oversight. That facility, by the way, I visited that facility back in March of this year. The max capacity there is 100. There are rumors, we cannot verify that because we were not allowed inside, that at that time they were holding close to 1,000 people. And that would make sense. Could be the reason why they did not allow us inside, because they didn't want us to see the chaos that they had inside, depriving people of basic needs like water and food and a bed. We did see 9 vans leave the location during the time that we were there.
Congresswoman, are you saying you were attacked? Number one. Number two, and if so, and if you believe that, is that why you posted on social media Friday that ICE needs to, in your words, get the I can't say what you said, out of Los Angeles?
No, Friday, I posted that as I was on a plane flying to LAX, and I was seeing this violence being unleashed in a community that I served as a 911 dispatcher for over 17 years. And I posted that ICE needed to get the out of Los Angeles to allow the local jurisdiction to keep control or to take back control of the situation. I stand by those comments. We would not be having this violence if Trump had not sent ICE in the way that they responded. You know, let's step back and think back to the last time, 5 years ago, when we had violent demonstrations in the street. Who was in office then? It was Donald Trump. Fast forward 5 years, and again, we have these violent demonstrations. And who is in charge again? It's Donald Trump, creating chaos where chaos should not be happening. ICE agents in the past have come in and arrested people. They have a list, they have warrants, and they've taken and arrested people. And we haven't had the problems that we are seeing today. Why? Because their mission has changed. It is about quotas. It is about disappearing people. When they arrest someone, there is no justification. There is the database that they are supposed to update every time they bring somebody in so that the loved ones can find the location where their family member is, and they can send either an attorney or somebody to represent them. They are denying all of that information. Why? Because everyone is being fast-tracked to deportation.
California Democratic Congresswoman Norma Torres, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
The other night I said to myself for the first time, I don't know if I want to do this anymore.
Up next, more on that not meant to be heard admission from DNC Chair Ken Martin as intra-party fighting within the Democratic National Committee intensifies. You're watching Takeout. Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Here is a look at what else we, and now you, are watching this evening. President Trump's new travel ban took effect today, barring entry from 12 mainly Middle Eastern and African countries for any traveler without a previously approved visa. There are narrow exemptions, but most travelers will be denied entry. The move is designed to limit migration from countries the administration says lack proper vetting procedures and from which those with tourist or student visas have in the past overstayed their time in the United States. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said he is, quote, retiring, that's the word, retiring, all 17 members of a government panel of vaccine advisors. In a Wall Street Journal opinion piece, Kennedy said, quote, a clean sweep is needed to reestablish public confidence in vaccine science, unquote. Top U.S. and Chinese trade officials met today in London. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick are seeking a quick resolution of issues relating to export controls and access to rare earth minerals. Disagreements over tariffs remain, that's putting it mildly, and will be subject to future negotiations. Joining me now at the family table, CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson. She's in Los Angeles, not exactly at the family table, but that's okay. Someday she'll be here. And notice, remember, that's News of the U.S. congressional reporter Daniela Diaz and CBS News political reporter Hunter Woodall. Jessica, we've been on the California situation for quite a while, so stand by. I want to talk about some political stuff here at the table, but I promise I've got some questions for you. Hunter, let me start with you. Over the weekend, something emerged that was not supposed to emerge via audio about Ken Martin, the current DNC chair. Take it away.
Major, this was a tough weekend to be a Democrat. They had this small group of Democrats meeting back in May, and Politico got this recording of Ken Martin, the DNC chair, having a pretty vulnerable moment, talking about his relationship with this controversial DNC vice chairman, David Hogg. If we can give that a listen.
Mm-hmm.
I deeply respect you, David. I too was looking forward to working with you, but this has created a situation, and I'll be very honest with you, for the first time in my 100 days on this job, and Jessica knows this, the other night I said to myself for the first time, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. You essentially destroyed any chance I have to show the leadership that I need to. So it's really frustrating.
Whoa.
Not something you normally hear in a
No, you never
politics.
hear it. You never hear it.
And you don't hear this from a party chairman. And I've covered Ken Martin for years now. He's a very genuine person. But this was a moment where, when I talked to my sources yesterday after this recording became public, they were very upset, that this was essentially a group of, I believe, around 10 people who met. So then it caused a lot of bickering of, okay, who leaked this recording? And the person that most people pointed to was David Hogg, the controversial DNC vice chairman who was on that call. David Hogg gave a denial of sorts on social media yesterday. But this is all happening just before there's a movement actually to remove David Hogg from his role at the DNC. It's from a complaint that actually has nothing to do with its current controversies. But this is all building some weird momentum, and Democrats don't want to be talking about this right now, but they are.
Momentum in a decidedly self-destructive direction, not a positive direction. Danielle, I want to play for you something that we heard the vice president say in a moment on the Theo Von podcast, in which Theo Von read to the vice president in real time something from last week that we well remember. Elon Musk on President Donald Trump. Let's listen.
I haven't even seen this one.
But he goes, real Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. This is the real reason they have not been made public. Have a nice day. Nice signature from a South African DJT.
Man. Well, here's my basic reaction to all this stuff is look, first of all, absolutely not. Donald Trump didn't do anything wrong with Jeffrey Epstein. The guy is, whatever the Democrats and the media says about him, that's totally BS.
Wow.
Another wow.
Another wow.
It's a wow Monday here at the Takeout.
Major, I was on the Hill when that tweet dropped.
Right, of course.
Or I should say the post on X now.
Yes.
Let me correct myself. And I was watching members of Congress in real time say, whoa. To quote one of them, they said, it appears that mommy and daddy are fighting. That is what one Republican congressman said. It's interesting to see J.D. Vance, our vice president, kind of react to that as well and defend Donald Trump, because he's also, as you can tell, kind of caught off guard by that question.
Not expecting that.
Not expecting that. But I will say it was really interesting to see Elon Musk's post over the weekend.
Kind of pulling things back.
Reposting President Donald Trump's Truth Social posts about what's happening in Los Angeles, almost endorsing support from the administration and how they deployed the National Guard.
The gravitational alignment of immigration yet again asserting itself within the MAGA movement.
That's always been something that they all agree on. But it still goes back to the fact that they have these major disagreements about that one big, beautiful bill, and that those disagreements are not over and continue to play out.
Right. Those posts were not taken away. They're still up there and still stand. Jessica, I promised I would get back to you, and I'm so glad you're with us. So evaluate the legal basis on which the administration is asserting authority to deploy the National Guard, not just in California, but in other places, if it assumes unrest may occur related to immigration enforcement.
Well, thank you for the question. Thank you for having me here on what is now Wow Monday. So when we're looking at this statute and we're looking at the president's authority, he's pointing to something called Title 10. And he's pointing to a section of the federal statute that gives him the authority to say, I think there's a rebellion or the danger of a rebellion, and therefore I can federalize the National Guard. I have to say the first question should always be a powers question. Does the president have the power? And I would say the statute, Major, is a pretty broad grant of authority, not just to this president, obviously, but to any president. And then the question is there some sort of limitation? Is it that you need the consent of the state? I don't read the language of the statute as requiring that a governor says yes, or requiring that a governor says, frankly, anything at all. Then we have questions as to what the National Guard can do. And I will say this is where the statute is limited. By using his power under this statute, the president is saying that the National Guard can be called in, but only in a supporting role. The National Guard cannot suddenly start directly enforcing domestic law, but they can provide basically support services. They can help protect federal agents. They can help protect federal property. So big grant of authority, but somewhat limited role for the National Guard.
Jessica, thank you very much for that clarification and really important context. Very quickly, Hunter and Daniela, we have a primary in New Jersey tomorrow. Hunter?
Major, this is going to be interesting.
Governor's primary.
Governor's primary in New Jersey. You know, New Jersey and Virginia, they have these off-year elections. And New Jersey is one of those states, reliably blue, right? Democrats really, they struggled there, in 2024. Joe Biden won it by about 16 points, in 2020. Kamala Harris won it by about 6. That's a drop-off. New Jersey Democrats, they're worried about that. They're also worried because there is a big concern about, okay, the governor's office flips back and forth some years. A party doesn't hold this thing for 12 years in New Jersey. So political gravity, 2024 election, causing some tensions there.
And Daniela, Republicans think there's an opening there.
They do.
There may not be one, but they think there is.
There is, and I think it's just piggybacking off what happened and what we saw in the 2024 election, where Republicans clearly outperformed, won the Senate, won the House. They're, trying to really take over states as well, and they probably have a chance in what's happening, what Hunter just said, in New Jersey. Now, if I could just add I'm putting my reporter hat on, congressional reporter hat on. I'm very interested in seeing what happens between Josh Gottheimer and Mikey Sherrill, because, those two have to work together on Capitol Hill, and here they are about to have a debate.
And
we'll see
only one's going to win that primary, go on to the general. That's right. Daniela Diaz, Hunter Woodall, and Jessica Levinson in Los Angeles. We all agree it's Wow Monday. That's not necessarily a good thing, folks. It's just a thing. Coming up, new CBS News polling on how Americans view President Trump's deportation policies. It's kind of mixed. We'll explain here on The Takeout. Welcome back. CBS News has new polling on how the country views the Trump administration's immigration crackdown. We should note this survey took place last week before the unrest in Los Angeles began. There's always a top-line number. The top-line number, 54% approve of the president's deportation program, but there's always numbers beneath the top line. So help us with that. CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, your friend and mine, Anthony Salvanto, with the nuance beneath the top line. Anthony, take it away.
How are you, Major? And yeah, it's often more interesting because what we're doing here, especially as you mentioned, this is heading into the weekend. This is context for how people think about this issue. And let me start with this because it's a real pivot point in that. If folks think that the Trump administration is prioritizing the deportation of folks they feel are dangerous criminals, then they support the program. If they feel, as 47% do, that that's not the priority, then they don't. In fact, they not just support it, but I'll show you this. They're a big part of this 42% who think the program is making America safer as opposed to less safe. But there's another pivot point on this, and it has to do with how many people think the administration is trying to deport. So let me show you this. I asked very basically, is this what you expected? You see, a lot of people, 49%, say, no, they're trying to deport more people than they expected. And what you get on a crosstab there, I'll finish with this, is that the people who say they think the administration is trying to deport more people than they expected are actually more disapproving of the program. So you might interpret that as, wait a second, this isn't exactly what we expected. This isn't, maybe it's going too far in their minds. But the people who say, yep, this is what we expected, for many on the right, this is what they wanted when they voted for Donald Trump, that's 2/3, that's approval. That's the other pivot point here, Major.
So, Anthony, it sounds to me that at least in part, our survey data reflects what people heard then candidate Trump say about his intentions on immigration during the campaign. And since they're processing it as more or less in line with what they think they heard, or they remember what they heard, they're inclined to be nominally supportive of it.
Let me pick up on that, because as usual, just the right question there, right? Look at this. We don't rehearse this beforehand.
We don't rehearse this, folks. We really don't.
Although I'm sure that's quite obvious to the viewers. But look, this is a comparison of when I ask people, do you like the administration's goals in this program? You get a majority saying yes. Do you like the administration's approach? Far fewer. A majority say they dislike it. And that does speak to your point. What you expected versus what you think you were seeing. Now, I should add very quickly, though, for the Republican base, for MAGA, very strong support here. And on immigration, he does do better overall than on the economy.
Anthony Salvanto, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you. Tanks are rolling into Washington ahead of President Trump's military parade on Saturday. The Secret Service said today it is preparing for hundreds of thousands of people to attend. Troops and military vehicles will stream down Constitution Avenue to mark the 250th anniversary of the Army. It also just happens to be President Trump's birthday. Temporary fencing was installed around the White House today. Officials say they will leave no stone unturned in terms of security for this event. California is accusing the Trump administration of defying Governor Gavin Newsom's authority by deploying the state's National Guard. California Attorney General Rob Bonta, who filed that lawsuit, joins me next right here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. I am joined now by California's Attorney General Rob Bonta. He's here to discuss this afternoon the filing of a lawsuit against President Trump over his deployment of the National Guard against the wishes of Governor Gavin Newsom. Mr. Attorney General, thank you for your time. What's the basis of this lawsuit? Question one. And question two, what do you say to either Californians or those around the rest of the country who think this suit is trying to stop the president from protecting public safety by putting the National Guard to quell a riot or insurrection, as he describes it, on the streets of Los Angeles?
Well, thank you for having me. Honored to be with you again. And the state of California and the governor of California brought a lawsuit today in federal court here in California, challenging the unlawful deployment by the president of the United States of the National Guard. The authority that the president cites to only allows for the deployment of the National Guard by the president when there's an invasion by a foreign nation, which there's not, when there's a rebellion to overturn the leadership of the United States of America, which there is not, or when the regular forces of the federal government cannot execute the laws, which is also not present. The law also requires that the order to the National Guard be issued through the governor, meaning the governor needs to consent to calling in the National Guard, which he has not only not done, but he has strenuously objected to them being, the National Guard being called in. So that's the basis of our lawsuit. It's essentially that the president doesn't have the authority to call in the National Guard. The statute he relies on, the elements of it are not met. What do I say to people who are talking about public safety issues? One, I say this, most of the activity, the protesting that you see in the city and county of Los Angeles has been peaceful. Of course, there are some exceptions to that where there's been violence. We've seen that. It's well documented. And the very large and well-resourced law enforcement agencies and departments in LA, the sheriff's department is the largest in the nation. The LA Police Department is the third largest in the nation. They are well-resourced, highly trained. They have the resources to handle the issues. Before the National Guard arrived all issues were handled internally by the LAPD and by the Sheriff's Department. There's, of course, a protocol of calling for mutual aid if and when additional resources are needed. That has been relied on to some extent since the National Guard arrived, and there was an inflammation of issues and a provocation and an increasing in tensions. But still, the mutual aid resources have not yet been depleted, and perhaps they never will. And if they are, the governor of California, not the president, is well located to call the National Guard in if and when that's necessary. It's not necessary at this point.
Mr.
But
Attorney
public safety is
General,
a top priority.
Mr. Attorney General, what about word that we got late this afternoon that there is a ready-to-deploy order for some 700 Marines to come to Los Angeles?
We're aware of that, and unfortunate and unnecessary as well. The National Guard is not necessary, nor are the Marines necessary to be deployed. Again, local law enforcement, the Sheriff's Department, the LAPD, the mutual aid jurisdictions in and around the county and outside the county in Southern California are all well-resourced and able to handle the issues. If the National Guard is ever needed, the governor can call them in. But the president calling in the Marines, the president calling in the National Guard, it only stokes the flames, increases tensions, creates unneeded provocation. We want calm. We want peace. The president's actions have caused provocation and increase in tensions.
How do you regard the tactics so far deployed by Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement in Los Angeles?
I don't know all the details, but I will say there's an obvious right for federal immigration enforcement authorities to lawfully enforce immigration law. They can, if that's what they wish to do and focus on. Of course, if they do, then folks can't interfere or obstruct with their lawful execution of their duties. My hope is that they will always act lawfully and not violate anyone's rights, not racially profile, not unlawfully detain or arrest or use excessive force. And we hope that if they're going to exercise their authority, that it's always done lawfully.
Do you have a judgment as to whether or not that's occurred so far, Mr. Attorney General, very quickly?
We have reports that it has not occurred, which is very disturbing. That there has been unlawful use of force, that there has been racial profiling, that there has been unlawful detention and arrest. And so that's one side of the story from members of the public, Californians who've reached out to me. It's concerning, it's disturbing. If it's true, it's a problem. Government agents and immigration enforcement officers should be only exercising their authority lawfully.
California Attorney General Rob Bonta on this very busy news day. Thank you very much for your time, sir. I appreciate it.
Honored to be with you again. Thank you.
Before we go, I'd like to quote a Los Angeles law enforcement official. Listen carefully. Quote, "There is a delicate balance between over-policing or oppression and under-policing or permissiveness. You must use all the force required to control civil disorder. But in this balance, first, you use all your skill and wisdom to prevent. It's not just them and us anymore. It's all of us trying to become something better." That was LA Police Chief Tom Redden, quoted in this edition of Life magazine, August 23rd, 1968. Yes, 1968, which, as you can see, has a cover story on law and order in America. Redden was in charge of a police force and a city still reeling from the 1965 Watts riots that resulted in, brace yourself for these statistics, 34 deaths, more than 1,000 injuries, 3,400 arrests, and tens of millions in property damage. Redden emphasized de-escalation, dealing with community leaders first, so Los Angeles could, in his words, become something better. Words from 1968, words worth considering now. That's it for the Takeout today. Stick around. The Daily Report is coming up next here on CBS News 24/7.